a whisper of silk, a mask of gilded feathers, and a single stolen kiss in a moonlit alcove. For Rosalind Hayes, a paid companion, the royal masquerade was a duty, not a pleasure. But in the arms of a stranger, a man with a voice like dark velvet and a touch that set her soul on fire, she found a moment of pure rebellion. That moment ends, and the dream fades, until the next day, when she stands in the throne room and locks eyes with her anonymous stranger. Only this time he wears no mask, and on his head sits the crown of the king's heir. The orchestra swelled, a wave of violins crashing over the marble ballroom of the Aldorian palace. From her position just behind her employer, Lady Beatrice, Rosalind Hayes watched the sea of masks. They were birds, demons, mythical heroes, and jeweled goddesses. Everyone was someone else tonight, and yet everyone knew their place. Rosalind knew hers. She was the shadow, the plain, dove-grey dress in a room of peacocks. Her mask was a simple black domino, functional and unadorned. Her job tonight was simple: be available, be invisible, and fetch Lady Beatrice glasses of chilled champagne. "Do try to look less like you're attending a funeral, Rosalind," Lady Beatrice muttered, behind her own elaborate swan mask. "It's the King's Jubilee. You are fortunate I brought you at all." "My apologies, my lady," Rosalind said, her voice monotone. Fortunate was not the word she would have chosen. She felt like a caged bird brought to a gathering of eagles. These people, the barons, the duchesses, the diplomats, like that stiff Baroness von Hesse from Austria, lived in a world she could only observe. She felt a prickle of resentment. She was as intelligent as any of them, fluent in 3 languages, and better read than most men in the room, thanks to her late father, a penniless scholar. But her intellect was a commodity, bought by Lady Beatrice to draft witty letters and read dense political treatises aloud. Overwhelmed by the heat and the suffocating perfume, Rosalind slipped away during a boisterous quadrille. She knew the palace layout from her tedious afternoons waiting for her employer. She found a small, recessed balcony, hidden by heavy velvet curtains. She stepped out into the cool night air. The music was muffled here, the stars sharp and bright above the manicured gardens. She pulled off her mask, letting the breeze touch her face. "A fellow refugee, I see." The voice startled her. It was deep, laced with an intriguing mix of weariness and amusement. A man stepped from the deeper shadows of the alcove. He was tall, dressed in the simple, elegant black of a Venetian domino, his mask an unadorned raven's beak. He held no title or sigil on his costume. He could be anyone. I was just seeking some air, sir," Rosalind stammered, raising her mask to her face. "Please don't," he said, moving closer. "A mask is useless when the eyes above it are that expressive. You were looking at them all as if they were fools in a cage." Rosalind froze. "I would never presume such a thing." "But you'd think it," he chuckled, a low, warm sound. He leaned against the balustrade beside her, not too close, but sharing the small space. "And you wouldn't be wrong. Tell me, what does a—" he gestured to her simple dress. "A nightingale? Think of all these peacocks." She should have curtsied and left. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt a strange, reckless honesty rise in her. "I think," she said softly, "that it must be exhausting. To wear 2 masks, the one for the ball and the one they wear every day." He went very still. He turned to face her, the shadows masking his features, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "And you? Do you not wear one?" "Mine is one of necessity, sir. Not of sport." "A necessity," he mused. He reached out, slowly, and his gloved finger traced the edge of her simple mask. "You speak like a philosopher, not a—" What are you, in this grand performance? I am the audience, she whispered. No, he said, his voice dropping. You're not. You're the only real person in the room. He stepped closer. She could smell the faint, clean scent of expensive soap and something uniquely male. He was violating every rule of propriety. She should flee, but her feet felt rooted to the marble. And what of you, sir? She challenged, her heart hammering. Are you a peacock or a philosopher? Tonight, he murmured, his raven mask just inches from her domino. I am simply a man who found a nightingale in a garden. He didn't ask permission. He didn't have to. His hand moved from her mask to the back of her neck, his thumb finding the sensitive skin below her ear. It wasn't the clumsy fumbling of a drunken lord. It was deliberate, confident, and questioning. And then he kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste, dry pecks she read about in novels. It was acclaiming. It was deep and desperate, a drowning man taking air. She tasted wine on his lips, but beneath it was a raw hunger that matched her own unspoken, unnamed longing. Her hands, of their own accord, rose to grip his shoulders. She kissed him back with all the frustration of her caged life, all the passion she was forced to hide. A burst of laughter from the ballroom broke the spell. He pulled back, his breathing as ragged as hers. She could see the glint of his eyes behind the mask. He looked stunned, as if he'd surprised himself. I must go, she breathed, her cheeks burning. Wait, he said, his voice husky. Your name. To what end, sir? She replied, regaining a fraction of her composure. The masks come off at midnight. The fantasy ends. This, he said, touching his lips, was not a fantasy. Rosalind. Where is that girl? Lady Beatrice's shrill voice cut through the night. Panic seized her. I am late. I must. She curtsied, a clumsy automatic gesture, and fled, pulling the curtain aside. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze on her until she was swallowed by the light and noise of the ballroom, her lips tingling, her world irrevocably tilted on its axis. The next morning was a torture of grey reality. Rosalind's head ached, not from wine. She'd had none, but from the violent collision of fantasy and fact. The kiss replayed in her mind, the strength in his hands, the surprising softness of his lips, the raw, unfiltered honesty in that single moment. It was a secret, a perfect, dangerous jewel she clutched in her mind. Rosalind, my shawl. The green one, Lady Beatrice called from her dressing room. And don't look so pale. We are to be presented at court this morning. The king is frail, they say, and the prince is taking on more duties. It is vital we make an impression. Rosalind fetched the shawl, her hands trembling slightly. Court. She would be in the palace again, but this time in the harsh light of day, back in her role as a glorified servant. The stranger in the raven mask was probably a minor baron from a forgotten province, or perhaps a reckless second son. It was better that way. The throne room was intimidating. Gold leaf covered every surface, and somber portraits of Aldoria's monarchs stared down with judgmental eyes. Rosalind stood in the prescribed place, 3 paces behind and to the left of Lady Beatrice, her gaze fixed on the floor. A hush fell. The royal herald, Mr. Davies, struck his staff. His Royal Highness, Prince Alistair, Regent pro tempore, representing His Majesty King Theron. Rosalind kept her head down. She heard the heavy doors open, the rhythmic click of boots on marble, the murmur of the crowd. Lady Beatrice of House Hartmann, the herald announced. Rosalind moved forward in her employer's wake, her heart thumping for a different reason now, social terror. She executed her deep curtsy, eyes firmly on the intricate pattern of the rug. Your Highness, Lady Beatrice said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. A deep voice replied, "Lady Beatrice, a pleasure. We trust your father, Duke Hartmann, is in good health." That voice. It couldn't be. It was the same timbre, the same cultured weariness, the same undercurrent of amusement. Rosalind's blood ran cold. Slowly, agonizingly, she lifted her head. He stood on the dais, not in a black domino, but in the severe, immaculate, dark blue uniform of the Royal Guard, adorned with the golden sash of the heir. He was devastatingly handsome, with a strong jaw, serious eyes, and dark hair. He was also, unequivocally, the man from the balcony. Her breath hitched. A small, involuntary gasp escaped her lips, and he saw her. For a fleeting second, the mask of the Prince Regent slipped. His eyes, a startling, clear grey, widened. She saw shock, then recognition, and then something else, something dangerously complex. He didn't just see her, he remembered. His gaze flickered to her lips. A cough brought them both back. To his left, a stunning young woman in ice-blue silk, her golden hair coiled in a perfect coronet, was watching them. Her smile was brittle. "Your Highness," the woman said, her voice like chimes of glass. "You were saying?" The prince blinked, his composure snapping back into place like a steel trap. "Of course, Lady Genevieve. My apologies. I was welcoming our guests." He turned his gaze back to Lady Beatrice, but it was a blank, dismissive look. His eyes were cold now. The stranger from the balcony completely gone, replaced by the king's heir. He had dismissed her. He had dismissed them. Rosalind felt a wave of nausea. This was not a minor baron. This was the prince, the man intended for the sharp-eyed Lady Genevieve, the man who held the fate of the kingdom in his hands. And she, a lowly companion, had kissed him with a desperate, unbridled passion. She was ruined. If anyone ever found out, if he even hinted at it, she wouldn't just be dismissed. She would be exiled, a pariah. As she and Lady Beatrice curtsied their way backward, Rosalind chanced one last look. Prince Alastair was listening to Lady Genevieve, but his gaze was distant. As they reached the doorway, his eyes darted to her one last time. It wasn't a look of passion. It was a cold, hard, calculating stare. The man from the balcony was a dream. The man on the throne was a nightmare. For a week, Rosalind lived in a state of suspended terror. Every knock on the door made her jump. Every summons from Lady Beatrice made her stomach clench, convinced she had been discovered. She performed her duties in a fog, her mind constantly replaying the moment in the throne room, the shock on his face, and the cold mask that had replaced it. He must despise her. He must think her a scheming, opportunistic woman who had trapped him on that balcony. Or worse, he hadn't thought of her at all, and his glance had simply been one of fleeting recognition. Lady Beatrice was in a foul temper. "The prince barely looked at me," she complained, snapping her fan shut. "He spent the entire reception speaking with that vapid Genevieve. My father, Duke Hartmann, is not pleased. He says the prince is stubborn, resisting his duty." Rosalind murmured a neutral reply, but her mind was racing. Lady Beatrice's father was the Duke Hartmann, the king's calculating adviser, a man known for his political ambitions, and Lady Genevieve was his niece. This was a web of power, and Rosalind was a fly that had accidentally blundered into it. One afternoon, Lady Beatrice sent her to the palace library to retrieve a specific volume on maritime law for the Duke. Rosalind was grateful for the errand. The library was vast, silent, and her one place of solace. The scent of old paper and beeswax calmed her nerves. She found the dusty tome in a remote alcove, high on a shelf. As she balanced precariously on the rolling ladder, she heard footsteps, not the shuffling gait of the elderly librarian, but the firm, measured tread of a soldier. She froze. "I believe you are looking for Bartholomew's Doctrines of the Sea," a voice said. That voice, her third time hearing it, and each time it undid her. Rosalind slowly descended the ladder, her legs shaking. Prince Alistair stood at the end of the aisle, alone, dressed not in his formal uniform, but in a simple riding jacket and boots. He looked younger and more tired than he had in the throne room. "Your Highness," she breathed, sinking into a deep curtsy, her eyes on the floor. "Please," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "Rise. We are alone." She rose but kept her gaze lowered. "I was retrieving a book for Lady Beatrice, Your Highness, at the request of Duke Hartmann. My father's most loyal advisor," Alistair said, a subtle irony in his tone. He walked closer, and she had to fight the urge to step back. "You have been avoiding the main halls for a week." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He had been looking for her. "I am a companion, Your Highness. My place is not in the main halls, but where my employer directs me." "And on the balcony? Was that your employer's direction?" Her head snapped up. His face was unreadable, his grey eyes searching hers. "That was a mistake, Your Highness. The mask, the anonymity. I beg your forgiveness." "A mistake," he repeated. He closed the remaining distance between them, forcing her to tilt her head back to look up at him. "You call a moment of honesty a mistake? I have been suffocated by lies and duty my entire life. I've attended 1,000 balls and shaken 10,000 hands. That mistake on the balcony was the only real conversation I've had in a decade." "It was a kiss, sir," she whispered, her face burning. "Given to a stranger." "It was a kiss given to a man," he countered, his voice intense. "Not a prince. You didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain. You kissed me back as if you meant it." "I must go," she said, panicking. "If I am seen—" "You are seen," he said, his hand shooting out to gently grip her arm. It wasn't rough, but it was firm. "Rosalind." He knew her name. Lady Beatrice must have said it in the throne room. Hearing it on his lips sent a jolt through her. "Your Highness, please. You are the king's heir. You are to marry Lady Genevieve. I am nothing. I am a servant. What you are doing is dangerous. For me." "It is," he agreed, his gaze dropping to her mouth. "And yet here I am." He traced the line of her jaw with one finger, just as he had traced her mask. "I haven't been able to think of anything else. That intelligence in your eyes, that defiance." "I am not defiant," she pleaded. "I am terrified." "Good," he said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "It means you understand the stakes. I am not my father's puppet, Rosalind, and I am not Duke Hartmann's or Lady Genevieve's." "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to talk to you. I want to know what you think about Bartholomew's Doctrines of the Sea instead of what your employer wants from it. I want to know why you looked at a room full of the most powerful people in the world and saw only a cage." He released her arm, but the heat of his touch remained. "The old royal gardens," he said, his voice low and urgent. "By the West Fountain. Tomorrow, after the bells ring for vespers. No one goes there. The gate is rusted, but the key is hidden under the stone Neptune." It was a command, an invitation, a path to ruin. "I cannot," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You will," he said. It wasn't arrogance, but a desperate plea disguised as an order. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Rosalind leaned against the bookshelf. The heavy legal tome clutched to her chest, her heart threatening to beat its way out. The rusted iron gate groaned in protest, the sound echoing in the overgrown garden. Rosalind slipped through the gap, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and wild roses. The stone Neptune, its face obscured by ivy, stared blankly as she hurried toward the sound of the fountain. Alistair was there, waiting. He was dressed again in simple, dark civilian clothes. For a moment, he wasn't the prince. He was just the man from the balcony. "You came," he said, relief washing over his features. "This is madness," she replied, pulling her shawl tighter. "If I am caught, you won't be." He gestured to a stone bench. "Please, just talk to me. Tell me about the books your father loved." And so began their secret. Twice a week, in the twilight hours, they met in the forgotten garden. He would ask her questions, not about court gossip, but about her thoughts. They talked about philosophy, about the new steam engines in the north, about the poetry he secretly wrote and she secretly critiqued. She discovered a man burdened by the crown, intelligent and deeply lonely. He discovered a woman whose mind had been starved, whose wit was as sharp as her observations were true. They never spoke of the kiss. It hung between them, a silent, charged promise. The danger was part of the allure, but they were not as unseen as they believed. Lady Genevieve was no fool. She had seen the flicker of recognition in the throne room. She had noticed the prince's new, distracted air. He was performing his duties, but his mind was elsewhere. He was polite to her, but the wall between them was higher than ever. And she had noticed Rosalind, the plain, quiet companion who always seemed to be vanishing on errands. "She is a nobody," her uncle, Duke Hartmann, said dismissively at their weekly private dinner. "Nobodies are the most dangerous, uncle," Genevieve replied, sipping her wine. "They have nothing to lose. The prince is resisting the engagement. He finds me predictable. He's looking for a distraction, and that mousy little servant has the precise look of a sentimental mistake." "A mistake we can use," Hartmann mused, steepling his fingers. "The king is weak. He relies on my counsel. If the prince proves himself unstable, unfit, his father might be persuaded to strengthen my position. Perhaps as Lord Protector." "And my position as Queen?" Genevieve asked, her voice sharp. "Will be assured," he said smoothly. "But first, we must remove the distraction, and we must do it in a way that damages the prince's judgment, not our own. Find out where they meet." Genevieve employed a palace guard, a man named Sergeant Cobb, whose gambling debts she had quietly paid. Cobb was a man of shadows and whispers. It took him a week, but he found the rusted gate. He watched from the cover of the overgrown yews as the prince and the companion sat on the bench, not touching, but closer than any two people had a right to be. The next day, Rosalind was sent to the palace jewel-keeper's office to retrieve a brooch Lady Beatrice had sent for repair. The office was in a secure wing. Rosalind was nervous. It was the first time she'd been in this part of the palace since the throne room. Mr. Harding, the jewel-keeper, was flustered. "Here you are, miss. Lady Beatrice's emeralds. Sign the ledger, please." Rosalind signed her name, took the velvet box, and left. She felt a strange prickle on the back of her neck, a feeling of being watched. As she turned a corner, she bumped hard into someone. "My apologies," said Lady Genevieve, her smile as cold as her ice-blue dress. The velvet box tumbled from Rosalind's hands, springing open. The emerald brooch skittered across the marble floor. "Oh, dear," Genevieve said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Dropping things, are we? You seem so flustered, Miss Hayes. Rosalind knelt, her face flaming, as she scooped up the brooch. My apologies, Lady Genevieve. It was clumsy of me. Yes, Genevieve said, looking down at her. It was. She leaned in, her voice a poison-laced whisper only Rosalind could hear. You are playing a very dangerous game. The West Garden is lovely this time of year, is it not? But snakes are known to hide in the roses. Be careful you don't get bitten. Rosalind's blood turned to ice. She knew. Genevieve smiled, a predator's smile. See that you return that to your mistress. It would be a tragedy if anything else were to go. Missing. Rosalind fled, her heart hammering. The web was no longer tightening. It had snapped shut. Rosalind didn't go to the garden that evening. She sent a message, a single word. Snake, on a scrap of paper, delivered to Alistair's aide, Captain Marcus, a man she'd seen but never spoken to. It was a desperate hope that Alistair would understand the warning. The next 2 days were a silent agony. Lady Genevieve was everywhere, her cold blue eyes following Rosalind at every turn. Lady Beatrice, oblivious, was thrilled. Lady Genevieve invited me to tea, she gushed. She was so charming. She even asked about you, Rosalind. She said she was impressed by your diligence. Rosalind knew a cat playing with a mouse when she saw one. The blow fell on a Thursday. Rosalind was organizing Lady Beatrice's correspondence when the door to their chambers burst open. It was not a footman. It was Captain Hollis of the Palace Guard, a grim-faced man, flanked by 2 soldiers. Behind him, looking profoundly sympathetic, was Duke Hartmann, and behind him, her face a mask of concern, was Lady Genevieve. "Miss Rosalind Hayes?" Captain Hollis boomed. "Yes," Rosalind whispered, standing up. Lady Beatrice looked on, mouth agape. "You are to come with us, by order of the King's Council." "On what charge?" Lady Beatrice shrieked, finally finding her voice. Duke Hartmann stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on his relative's arm. "My dear Beatrice, I am afraid it is a most serious matter. A state matter." "What?" Rosalind was trembling, but her voice was clear. "I have done nothing. A diplomatic dispatch, intended for the King's eyes only. A private letter from the Austrian ambassador, Baroness von Hesse, has been stolen," Captain Hollis said. "It contained sensitive information regarding our trade negotiations." "What does this have to do with me?" Rosalind asked, though she already knew the answer. "The letter was last seen in the office of the King's scribe," Hollis continued. "And this," he held up a small, velvet box, "was found in your quarters, hidden beneath your mattress. Found by a maid this morning." He opened the box. It was not Lady Beatrice's brooch. It was a heavy gold signet ring, one Rosalind had seen on only one hand. It was Alistair's, the personal ring of the prince. "This is madness," Rosalind cried. "I have never seen that ring before in my life." "The ring was reported missing by the prince himself 2 days ago," Duke Hartmann said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "And the maid, sadly, also found this." He produced a piece of vellum. It was a map, a crude but accurate drawing of the secret passageways leading to the King's private study. It is a forgery." Rosalind was desperate. I can't even draw." "But you can read," Lady Genevieve said softly, stepping forward. "We all know how clever you are, Miss Hayes. Fluent in German, are you not? The language of the Austrian dispatch. You were seen in the secure wing, near the scribe's office, the day the letter vanished." "I was fetching a brooch." Rosalind looked at Lady Beatrice, pleading. "My lady, tell them. You sent me." Lady Beatrice looked from the stern face of Captain Hollis to the powerful, disappointed gaze of Duke Hartmann. She saw her social standing, her connection to power, evaporating. She made her choice. "I I did send her, Lady Beatrice said, her voice weak. But I never thought. Rosalind, how could you? She covered her face, a perfect picture of betrayed trust. She has been acting strangely for weeks, Genevieve added, layering the evidence. Secretive, vanishing for hours. I warned you, Duke Hartmann. I suspected she was not to be trusted. It's a lie, Rosalind shouted, the tears finally coming. She's lying. She threatened me. She knew about... She stopped, but it was too late. Knew about what, Miss Hayes? Duke Hartmann asked, his voice silky smooth. Knew about your secret meetings with the prince? Knew that you used your influence to steal his ring, to gain access to state secrets? Did you intend to sell them? Or were you merely a jilted lover, taking revenge? It was a perfect trap. Every truth was twisted into a weapon. Her secret meetings were proof of her manipulation. Her intelligence was proof of her capability for espionage. Her denial was proof of her guilt. Take her, Captain Hollis ordered. The soldiers gripped her arms. Rosalind looked past them, past the Duke's false pity and Genevieve's triumphant smirk, to her employer. Lady Beatrice, she begged. Lady Beatrice turned her back. You are accused of theft of royal property and high treason, Captain Hollis read. You will be held in the South Tower to await the King's judgment. As they dragged her from the room, Rosalind's mind was clear on one devastating fact. They hadn't just framed her. They had framed Alistair, too. By planting his ring, they had inextricably linked the heir to the throne with a treasonous plot, proving his judgment faulty and his character weak. She hadn't just been a distraction. She had been the weapon they used to destroy him. Alistair slammed his fist onto the heavy oak desk. She is innocent. It is a fabrication, and you know it. I know what the evidence suggests, Duke Hartmann said, his voice maddeningly calm. They were in the King's private council chamber. The King himself, Theron, sat in a high-backed chair, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Your Highness, we all understand youthful indiscretions. The girl is clever. She saw an opportunity and took it. She preyed on your loneliness. She did no such thing, Alistair roared. Son, the King's voice was a dry rasp. The evidence is strong. Your ring, the map, her presence in the secure wing, her secret meetings with you. It paints a damning picture. Duke Hartmann informs me the Austrian ambassador is demanding a resolution. The evidence was planted, Alistair spat, rounding on Hartmann. This is your doing, yours and your niece's. Hartmann raised an eyebrow. Your Highness, to accuse a loyal servant of the crown and the lady you are intended to marry, it only makes you look more compromised. Let the girl face the tribunal. Accept the consequences. Show the people your judgment has returned. Marry Genevieve. Put this unfortunate episode behind us. Alistair looked at his father. He saw the political checkmate. If he fought this, he looked like a lovesick fool, controlled by a common spy. He would damage the crown, perhaps irreparably. If he sacrificed Rosalind, he would appease Hartmann, secure the Austrian alliance, and prove himself a king. He saw the trap, and he refused to step in it. No, Alistair said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. I will not. Alistair, the King warned. I will not send an innocent woman to the gallows to cover my own political inconvenience, Alistair said. And I will not be blackmailed into a marriage I do not want. You want the real traitor, Duke? I will find him. He stormed from the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. He found his aide, Captain Marcus, waiting in the antechamber. Marcus was a soldier, not a nobleman, a man Alistair trusted with his life. Your Highness, Marcus asked, seeing the fury on his face. They have her, Alistair said. "Hartman and Genevieve. They framed her for treason." Marcus, a man of few words, simply nodded. "What do we need?" "The truth. They built a lie, so we find the one brick that doesn't fit. The Austrian dispatch. They claim she stole it. What if it was never stolen at all? What if the thief is the one who reported it missing?" "Duke Hartman," Marcus said. "Exactly. He controls the king's correspondence. He's the only one who could have reported it stolen when it was, in fact, sitting on his own desk. But how do we prove it? And the ring? How did they get my ring?" "You reported it missing 2 days ago," Marcus reminded him. "I know. I left it on my desk when I went riding. When I returned, it was gone. I assumed a careless servant. But Genevieve was in the study that morning. She brought me some documents to sign." "She took the ring," Marcus concluded. "And the map." "Who drew the map? It was crude, you said." "Yes," Alistair mused. "Not the work of a professional. Almost childlike. Or the work of someone pretending to be unskilled." He paced. "The guard, Sergeant Cobb, the man Genevieve uses for her errands. He's a gambler, and he has a sloppy hand. I've seen his reports." "Cobb," Marcus said. "I'll find him. But the dispatch is the key. If Hartman has it, he'll have hidden it. Not in his office. Too obvious." "His city residence," Alistair said. "He trusts no one. He would keep it close. But we can't get a warrant to search a duke's house based on a hunch." "Then we don't use a warrant," Marcus said, his meaning clear. "No," Alistair said. "I won't break the law to enforce it. We have to be smarter. We need to make him move it. We need to make him think his plan has failed." Alistair's mind was racing. "The tribunal is set for tomorrow. They mean to have her condemned before I can act. We have to stop it. Hartman's power comes from his control of information. We need to seize it." "Your Highness," a trembling voice said from the doorway. It was Mr. Davies, the Royal Herald, a man who saw everything. I beg your pardon." "What is it, Davies?" Alistair asked impatiently. I was in the King's scribe office the day Miss Hayes was there," the elderly man stammered. "She was there, but Lady Genevieve was there first. I saw her exit the scribe's private room as Miss Hayes was arriving. Lady Genevieve, she smiled at me. It was not a pleasant smile." Alistair grabbed the man's shoulders. "Davies, are you certain?" "Yes, Your Highness. I thought nothing of it, until now." This was it. The first crack in the facade. Genevieve wasn't just the planner. She was the operative. She planted the map. She had access. "Marcus," Alistair said, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Find Sergeant Cobb. Use any means necessary. Get his confession. I am going to see my father, and I am going to demand a full, open-court tribunal, not a private council. I want all the players on the stage." "And the dispatch?" Marcus asked. "Hartman's overplayed his hand," Alistair said. "He believes I'm a lovesick boy. He's forgotten I am a soldier. He's forgotten I am my father's son. He wants a show. We will give him one, and we will see who is unmasked." The Great Hall was not a room. It was a theatre of judgment. Every seat in the public gallery was filled. Lords, ladies, merchants, and commoners, packed shoulder to shoulder, had come to see the companion who had dared to fly so high only to be burned by the sun. They whispered behind their hands, their eyes 1,000 points of hostile curiosity, all fixed on the small, guarded door from which she must enter. At the front, the room was a portrait of power. On the central dais sat King Theron, his face a parchment of illness and worry, but his eyes still sharp. To his right, Prince Alistair sat bolt upright, his face a thundercloud of controlled rage, his dark blue uniform immaculate. To the king's left, at the prosecution table, sat Duke Hartmann, his expression one of profound, sombre duty. In the front row of the gallery, veiled in black lace, as if attending a funeral, sat Lady Genevieve, the perfect image of a noblewoman wronged. The heavy door groaned open. "Bring in the prisoner!" Captain Hollis boomed. Rosalind entered, flanked by 2 guards. She was not in chains, but her hands were bound before her with a simple rope. She wore the same plain grey dress she had been arrested in. She looked small, pale, and utterly alone. As she was led to the centre of the hall, a hush fell, so deep it was almost a roar. She did not look at the crowd. She did not look at Genevieve. She did not even look at Alistair. She walked, her head held high, and fixed her gaze on the king. "Miss Rosalind Hayes," the king's voice rasped, "you stand accused of theft of royal property and high treason. The evidence against you is substantial. Duke Hartmann, you may present your case." Hartmann rose, his voice, like oil on stone, filling the hall. "Your Majesty, Your Highness, my peers, it is with the heaviest of hearts that I stand here. We have been betrayed, not by an enemy at the gates, but by a viper in our midst. He built his fortress of lies, brick by brick. He called the first witness, the maid, Sarah. The young girl was trembling, her eyes wide with terror. "Sarah," Hartmann said, his voice deceptively kind, "please, tell the court what you found in the prisoner's quarters." It was under the mattress, my Lord Duke," she whispered, twisting her apron. A wooden box, like she said. And what was in this box? The gold, the Austrian gold coins, and the map. And this." She pointed to the evidence table, where Alistair's signet ring sat on a velvet cushion, a damning, silent witness. Rosalind tried to catch the maid's eye, to send a message of, "Tell the truth." But Sarah looked away, a tear rolling down her cheek. She was a pawn, too terrified to do anything but say her lines. "Thank you, child. You may go," Hartmann said, dismissing her. "And now I call a witness to the prisoner's character. Lady Beatrice of House Hartmann." Lady Beatrice, Rosalind's employer, swept to the stand. This was not a testimony. It was a performance. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I took her in," Beatrice sniffled, projecting to the gallery. "I treated her as if she were my own kin. I gave her clothes, a roof. I trusted her. But she was secretive, always vanishing on errands, always jumpy, always pale. She was painting a picture of a guilty conscience. When Captain Hollis showed me, when I saw the prince's ring," she broke down in a theatrical sob, "to think she used my home, my generosity, to plot against the crown, to seduce the prince. It is a wound I shall never recover from." A murmur of sympathy for Beatrice and disgust for Rosalind rippled through the crowd. Rosalind felt a cold, sharp anger cut through her fear. This was the final, public betrayal. "A damning portrait," Hartmann said, turning to the king. "A young woman with a clever mind, ambitions far above her station, and a deceitful heart. She used her influence with the prince to gain access, to steal his ring as a token, to draw a map of the scribe's offices, and to steal a vital diplomatic dispatch from our Austrian allies, no doubt to sell to our enemies." He sat down. The case was closed. The evidence was absolute. "Miss Rosalind Hayes," the king said, his voice heavy with resignation. "Have you anything to say in your defense?" This was it. Rosalind's hands were bound, but her mind was not. She took a deep breath, and her voice, though not loud, was clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "I have only the truth, Your Majesty. I did not steal the dispatch. I did not draw that map. The ring and the gold were planted in my room." "A convenient lie," Hartman scoffed. "Is it?" Rosalind challenged, her eyes flashing. "Let us look at this evidence. A map to the scribe's office. Why would I need such a map? I was sent there by Lady Beatrice. I signed the ledger. I had legitimate business there. And why would I, a companion, hide a prince's signet ring under my mattress? It is a thing I could never sell, never wear, and could only use to incriminate myself. It is not the act of a clever spy. It is the act of a clumsy framer." Alistair's eyes widened slightly. He had not expected her to fight back with such logic. "And what of your secret meetings with the prince?" Hartman shot back. "Admit it. You met him in secret." "I did," Rosalind said, shocking the court into silence. She turned to Alistair. "I met with a man who was lonely. I spoke with a man who was kind. I did not meet with a prince to gain his secrets. I met with a friend." "A friend?" Genevieve cried out from the gallery, her voice a sharp, poisoned dart. "You call seducing your future king friendship?" "Silence," the king commanded. "I will not be silent." Genevieve stood, her black veil falling back. Her face was a mask of beautiful fury. This creature accuses me. She, who trapped the prince in a garden. She, who has plotted and schemed to take my place. You are a gutter-born snake, a whore, and a traitor, and you will hang for it." Hartman smiled. The outburst was perfect. It painted Genevieve as the passionate, wronged fiancé. "Lady Genevieve is right," Rosalind said calmly. "I am being accused by the very person who stands to gain the most, the person who wanted me gone, the person who saw the prince's momentary kindness to a servant as a threat to her own ambition, the person who had the access, the motive, and the cruelty to set this entire trap." She turned to the king. "I did not plant the map, but I believe I know who did. I have a witness. I call Mr. Davies, the royal herald." Alistair sat forward. This was not part of their plan. This was Rosalind, acting on her own. The elderly herald, Mr. Davies, looked as if he were about to faint. He walked to the centre of the hall, his knees knocking. "Mr. Davies," Rosalind said, her voice kind. "On the day I was sent to the jewel keeper, did you not see me in the secure wing?" Davies nodded, swallowing. I did, miss." "And who else did you see there, just before I arrived?" Davies's eyes darted to Duke Hartman. The Duke gave him a look so cold, so full of murderous promise, that the old man flinched. He then looked at Alistair, who simply nodded, a silent promise of protection. The old man took a deep breath. I saw Lady Genevieve. She was exiting the king's scribe's private office, the one the map leads to." Genevieve's face went white. "He's lying. He's senile. The prince has bribed him." "He is lying!" Hartman roared, rising to his feet. "This is a farce. The girl is desperate. She is flinging mud. Your Majesty, I demand you end this." "This is improper," Alistair's voice boomed, silencing the hall. He stood, not as a son, but as the Prince Regent. "And I will not stand for it. Duke Hartman, you have questioned my judgment. You have accused the woman who is my friend, of treason. You have put the crown itself on trial. You are right. This is not a farce. This is a matter of state. And as the man whose ring was stolen, and whose judgment is in question, I am the primary witness." Alistair strode to the centre of the hall, standing beside Rosalind. He faced the Duke. "You built a case on lies. Now, you will face the truth. Captain Marcus. Bring in Sergeant Cobb." The side door opened. Captain Marcus entered, his face grim. He was not alone. He was dragging a dishevelled, weeping, utterly broken Sergeant Cobb. Cobb, the man Genevieve had paid. "No," Genevieve whispered, sinking back into her seat. Cobb fell to his knees before the king. I confess. I confess," he blubbered. "Tell them," Alistair commanded, his voice like ice. "It was Lady Genevieve," Cobb cried, snot and tears running down his face. She knew about my gambling debts. She said she'd clear them. She'd make me rich. She gave me the prince's ring. She'd taken it from his desk. She told me to draw the map. "Make it look clumsy," she said, "like a woman's hand." She gave me the Austrian gold. She told me to hide it all. Hide it in the companion's room. Genevieve let out a strangled sob. The hall was in stunned silence. But Hartman was not done. He was a political animal, a cornered rat. He laughed, a cold, sharp laugh. "A forced confession," he shouted, pointing at Cobb. "A worthless scrap of words from a known gambler. This proves nothing. It is the word of a desperate man against a noble woman. It proves nothing about the true crime, the stolen dispatch, the Austrian letter." "Where is it, Your Highness? All this theatre and the fact remains. The dispatch is gone. Miss Hayes stole it, and our kingdom is at risk. Your little performance has failed." He looked smug. He believed he had won. The dispatch was the key, and he knew it was safely hidden in his own study. Alistair smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "You are right, Duke. The dispatch is the only thing that matters. You seem very, very concerned about it. You've built your entire case on it being missing. You ask, where is it?" Alistair let the tension stretch, a wire pulled to its breaking point. He reached inside his breast pocket. "So, you must be wondering," Alistair said, his voice a lethal whisper, "how I have it." He produced a letter, sealed with the unmistakable eagle of the Austrian Empire. If Hartman's face had been pale before, it was now the colour of ash. The blood drained from it, leaving only pure, unadulterated shock. That's impossible." "Is it?" Alistair said. "You see, I too grew suspicious of this crisis that so perfectly suited your ambitions, so I sent my own man, Captain Marcus, on a very fast horse to Baroness von Hesse last night. She was confused to hear her letter was stolen, since she had hand-delivered the original to you, Duke Hartman, 2 days ago." He held up the letter. "This is a copy, but the Baroness was kind enough to transcribe it for me." Alistair broke the seal and read, his voice ringing with the force of judgment. "My dearest Duke Hartman, as per our agreement, I have informed the king of a minor trade dispute to create the necessary political pressure. The 50,000 crowns have been deposited in your Viennese account. Once you are named Lord Protector and the prince is sidelined, we will have full control of the northern trade routes." The hall exploded. "Treason!" a lord roared. Hartman, his face a mask of primal fury, let out an animalistic snarl. He yanked the ceremonial dagger from his boot. "Traitorous whelp!" He lunged, not at the guards, but at Alistair. He never made it. Captain Marcus, a soldier trained for war, not caught, moved with lightning speed. He didn't use his sword. He struck the Duke across the temple with the heavy, steel-covered hilt. The sound was a sickening thud. Hartman crumpled to the marble floor, unconscious. At the same time, Lady Genevieve, her mind snapping, began to scream. "No, he made me. It was him. All him. I just wanted to be queen. He made me." King Theron rose from his throne. The frailty was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying rage. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Silence!" The hall fell quiet, the only sound Genevieve's hysterical sobbing. "Guards!" the king commanded. "Seize them. Seize them both. They will be held in the South Tower for high treason." As Hartmann was dragged away like a sack of meat, and the shrieking Genevieve was hauled to her feet, a soldier moved to Rosalind. He used his own knife to cut the ropes from her wrists. The hall was silent, everyone watching. Alistair, his chest still heaving from the confrontation, turned to Rosalind. He stood before her, not as the prince, but as the man from the balcony. In front of his father, the court, and the entire kingdom, he looked at her, his eyes filled with a raw, public admiration. "Rosalind Hayes," he said, his voice clear and strong for all to hear. "You stood against the most powerful man in this kingdom, armed with nothing but the truth. The crown, and the man who wears it, are in your debt." She met his gaze, the tears she had refused to shed finally welling in her eyes. "You saved my life." "No," Alistaxion said, his voice softening so only she could hear. "We saved each other's." He took her hand, the hand of a companion, now free. He lifted it to his lips and kissed it. It was not a kiss of secret passion, stolen in the shadows of a masquerade. It was a kiss of public honor, sealed in the bright, unforgiving light of the throne room. The fantasy was over. Reality, it turned out, was far more extraordinary. And so, the companion became the confidant, and eventually, the crown princess. Rosalind's journey wasn't one of magic, but of sharp intellect and unwavering courage. She and Alistair ruled not as fairy tale monarchs, but as partners, their bond forged in secret gardens and tempered by a trial of fire. They dismantled the web of corruption Duke Hartmann had spent decades weaving, and their reign was remembered as one of truth and justice. Lady Beatrice, incidentally, retired to the countryside in disgrace. The story of the masquerade kiss became a palace legend, a reminder that sometimes the most honest person in the kingdom isn't wearing a crown, but a simple domino mask. Thank you for listening to this story. Did the ending surprise you? Do you think Duke Hartmann got what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback is what keeps these stories alive. If you enjoyed this journey of romance and royal intrigue, please hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. We have new dramas coming every week, and you won't want to miss them.